Welcome to Beyond Sundays, a podcast from two friends trying to follow Jesus more closely. Odds are you won't always agree with us, and we'll stumble along the way, but we promise to be open and honest all the way through. I'm Matt, here with Hannah. We've got a website you can use to keep our show links and socials all in one place. Check out beyondsundays.pod.com. We're grateful for all of our listeners and genuinely thank you for fitting us into your busy life. You can help us grow the community by following, rating, and reviewing us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We definitely have the best people in the business. We know that's true. What's up, Hannah? How are you?
I'm good. I'm still jealous of the lighting that you have over there. I'm like, oh my gosh. How do I not have a ring light or whatever those things are called? Something like that to make this lighting better. I'm
Well,
still trapped in a basement.
I think you look wonderful.
Yeah. I look a little I look like I'm in a dungeon, which is kind of what it's like in my mom's basement
No,
recording
come
this.
on. Come on.
Oh,
That's all
that
right.
lighting's good.
Well, I got a new laptop in part because we do this and in part because of a bunch of other reasons. And it's funny that you brought that up because when you get a new piece of technology or I mean, listeners, even if you haven't bought something new lately, if an app updates and like the user interface changes. This is, by the way, Hannah was worried about us doing this too much. This is just flat out going to be old people talk. So just prep your hearts and minds because that's coming at you right now. When apps change and I can't find, oh my gosh, I'm just going to sound like an 85-year-old person. When I can't find the way that it used to be, I like rebel again. I get so mad I want to delete stuff.
100%. But I will say I have so many photos on my phone. I don't know how long it's been since my phone is updated. So Liam's looks totally different and it's weird. And it's like they update things and make it look different just to do
You're
that and
not
to confuse
updating your
people.
phone because of your pictures? Why?
I have
What's
too
the
many
deal with that?
pictures. It takes too long. I think it's because I screenshot things and they sit in my phone. I mean, I have like 13,000 pictures or something absurd. But I it takes so long to go through and delete them. And then they all go to your deleted folder and then I forget to delete that. So they're still
Why
there.
is an update to your phone deleting your folder, your photos?
Because you have to have so much space on your phone in order to update it.
Oh,
And I don't
you're
have enough.
cranking the okay, okay.
Yeah, and I don't have enough space. And I what's crazy is the idea if I would have known I was going to have this much space on my phone 10 years ago, I
Uh-huh.
would have cried myself to sleep in excitement thinking I was like rich or something. But this is just normal now and it's not enough space.
No
I
free
don't
ads, but 99 cents for Apple gives you $50, 50 gigabytes a month of storage. It's a
I know,
dollar.
but what's 50 gigabytes like?
Oh, that's a
I,
lot of
I
photos.
haven't had anything in Apple in my Apple thing
iCloud
for
thing?
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, for forever. It hasn't been able to update for years, probably. It's bad. It's really
Okay. I
bad.
thought that this conversation was going to be about like updating things, not being able to find things. I think this conversation just turned into an intervention for you. What are you doing? So
Well,
if
I
your
mean, it's
phone fell
like,
out of your pocket and fell in Bryn Lake, you're just toast.
yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Does
like a
that
lot of
not
my
keep you up at
condos.
night thinking like I have no more of these pictures? I mean, I probably have close to that many photos and just like pictures of Genevieve on Mount Hood in Oregon. And if
Well,
I didn't have that where it was okay, I would be
yes,
real stressed out.
I have some shared albums. And then there was one point when I tried to take all my photos off my phone and put them on a hard drive that Liam keeps and keeps it
Yeah,
safe.
yep.
But I don't know that I did it right. And it's like it already takes so long to do it.
It
I was just
does.
annoyed and I'm like, okay, that's why I don't do things like that. If it's inconvenient and I've already tried and sat down and I wasn't able to
Wow.
accomplish it, then I don't want to do it again.
So you are super anti-update. You like
No, I
want your
just
phone like cast in amber, like a
well,
dinosaur fossil when you
it's
get it.
not no, it's not even that I'm up that I'm against an update. It's that it just at this point it would take too much time. I have other stuff to do. And
Yeah.
I'm just hoping and believing it's not going to break. I mean, the
Okay.
newer stuff stays, I think.
In the summer, when you and I are both off, we're just gonna take a morning and we're gonna sit down and we're gonna get your phone in working order.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, we can do that. Yeah, I don't know how long
But
it's
what about
been.
apps on the update? Like an app that you're used
Okay,
to going
they
to and they like switch buttons around and
yeah.
I think it's good sometimes to just give it a fresh look. I do think that like over the long term, you don't want to just keep using something that looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth because when they do an update, after I get used to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is so much better.
Yeah, and
But
well,
that
sometimes it's
first,
slow.
oh, that
Slow updates and then
yes.
eventually it's totally different.
That first update when they change it though, I am just like, why did you take my life?
Yeah.
Nobody
Like
asked you to do this.
when they changed from the button on the iPhone,
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I could not believe it.
The home button.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was not going to get a phone without it. And now I can't imagine having an iPhone home button.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
The girls have the girls have one of our old iPads that still has the button for the
Uh,
home. And I was like looking something up on their iPad the other day and I needed to go back and I just started swiping the bottom of the screen and I was like, "What is wrong? What is happening?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, the button." Yeah, I
That's
totally forgot
so
about the button.
weird. And you just get used to something totally different. It's outrageous.
Yeah, there's something deep and philosophical about this conversation that we're not going to get into today on the
Nope.
Beyond Sundays podcast, but there's something here about habit and what we get used to and what we stop thinking about and what we put on autopilot. And we're all like this. I
Oh
really
yeah.
think too, the older you get, the more on autopilot. Like you set something the way you like it, and you just never want to touch it again. You just want it to keep working.
Well, yeah, and I always got maybe it kind of annoyed maybe the word when like old people were given a phone or something and they would ask questions that were so silly on how to work it and it's like I am a human too and I just sat down and just did it. Well then, and you just figure it out. But then
Yeah.
I get on Snapchat and I don't really use Snapchat
Right.
or TikTok for example when I'm doing stuff for the youth. I have to ask how to do all this stuff. I could just sit down and figure it out like I did when I was 19 years old. I just don't want to. Just
It's
tell me, show me because it's annoying.
it's real blind leading the blind too, because sometimes on TikTok I'll ask you how to do something, and so it's just like two people with 4 inch thick glasses on, you know what I mean, trying to see like, okay,
Yep.
what do we do now? Yeah,
Yep.
it's so, oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. I
It's
have to say
very
this.
bad.
I probably said this on this podcast, so sorry, listeners, if I have. But you were talking about like older people with technology. The single worst thing that can happen in your life is you're working at Staples and he fixed people's computers. And so sometimes people think that means they can bring their phone in and get their phone worked on. An old lady walking to you with her phone in your hands and she wants help fixing it. I'm like, this might as well be alien technology. I don't have the words to say to you. You don't have the capacity to understand me. We don't speak
Yeah.
the same language. I have no idea what we're going to do. And this is going to be the next hour and a half of my life. It's
Isn't
so
it
bad.
crazy though that that happens?
Do you think
It
that'll
just
be us?
I do. I think there are
Mm.
some ways that started for me,
Yeah.
which is scary. I'm not
I
old
don't,
enough for that.
I don't like
But yeah,
thinking
I
about
think it will
this.
be us.
I don't like thinking about this. Well, I, I guess we're going to talk about something that neither you nor I today like to think about, really.
Yeah.
And that is, we've alluded to this in the last couple episodes, but it's spiritual authority.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd say the average age of the co-host of this podcast is 35 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now you're doing a lot of the work there, so thank you. I
You're
don't know
welcome.
if it's okay for two people with an average age of 35 to use the word ick. But we're just going to
Oh yeah.
lean in and we're just going to use the word ick. And here's the thing, listeners, spiritual authority gives Hannah and I both the ick.
It does. It does give me the ick and I wish it didn't because it's very biblical. But I do have some press back today. I'm wondering, I've got some questions and some thoughts. I just want to see what you
You know
think.
what's funny about us getting the ick too is the ministry space that we both inhabit is we are both spiritual leaders.
100%.
So we like ick ourselves out.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why I can
It's
be
part of it. It's
so
like you're holding up a mirror to yourself and you're like,
all
ew,
the time.
gross.
You know what? That's a really good point. I wonder if that's a lot of it. I see it so firsthand.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. That's a good
Well,
point.
let's just start here. I think we should just jump in. I think everybody has an understanding of what spiritual authority is. Sometimes on this podcast, we try to step back and kind of define something. I think everybody kind of knows. I'm hoping everybody knows what the ick is. If you're over the age of 50 and you don't know what that is, just pause this, text somebody under the age of 50, and they'll tell you. So, Hannah, what is it? Besides maybe your own self being a spiritual leader, what is it about spiritual authority that gives you the ick? Just throw open the door, say whatever you want to say. We'll go back and forth here a little bit.
I think my number one thing, I started to make a list of things that
Hmm.
bother me. I was just trying to really think through it, and I really feel like it falls a lot under unquestioned authority.
Mm.
And I feel growing up in the area we've grown up in, um, and just growing up in church our whole life and it being a male dominated
Care-
specifically a white
careful,
male,
careful,
yeah, sorry,
careful.
sorry, a white male dominated profession.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot that has gone unchecked and I cannot I cannot count on both hands the number of times I have been around people that were preachers or spiritual leaders. And then when you got them at the table after service, and the honest to God, using racial slurs,
Mm.
saying things that were totally out of line from what they were just doing in a pulpit. And let me preface by saying that is not all.
Yeah,
Not at
sure,
all. I mean, I've had wonderful
sure,
experiences
sure.
with people in spiritual authority, but I think there's this like unchecked or unquestioned authority. You hear people say things and you think, oh, well, it's the man of God, so you can't push back. And I feel like specifically how I was brought up and the churches I was brought up in, that there was this like we would kind of idolize the people that
Hmm.
were in that pastoral position, and you couldn't really question if they had a direction or they had something they wanted. It couldn't be checked because they were the ones hearing from God. And what's so strange is in our in the way that we believe and we're brought up, like we're very much in tune with God too. It's not just like the pastor. It's very much taught that you can
Yeah,
receive from God and not be the pastor.
sure.
But yet the pastor heard things and was the ultimate authority, which to some extent should be the case, but it
That's
just
what's
feels
hard
like
about this, and we'll get
yeah,
into this, but it's like there's two truths. A, spiritual authority can be used in ways that are wrong. B, spiritual authority is biblical and incredibly important. C, spiritual authority can be used in ways that are right by humans. And
sure.
D, all of the above. So
Yep.
this is one of those things that we're all going to have to hold like multiple ideas in our head that can be true at the same time, and that can be challenging. I love the way that you shared kind of your background to this, and you can add more here. But before I share something of mine, I think it's good to say, and you've already hinted at this. You and I have had, by and large, good spiritual leaders
Oh
in our
yeah.
lives. Both of us has. And I don't want anybody who has been a spiritual leader in our life to listen to this and to think that we didn't appreciate what they did for us, or we didn't appreciate their leadership, or we didn't appreciate how hard it is to do this, because you and I both do this to a certain extent. On the other hand, I think probably every single spiritual leader in my life at some point or another has kind of given me the ick in some
Yeah.
way, exercising that authority. And I think the root to me of this is you are a spiritual leader, pastor, leader, ministry leader, whatever you are. You are, but you are also still a person.
Hmm.
And when those lines get blurred and you like when a person steps completely into the role of spiritual authority and they like leave their humanity behind, kind of forget that and just only act as though they are that spiritual authority, that's what they have become. That to me is what gives me the ick, because I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You have forgotten you make mistakes. You have
Yeah.
forgotten. And again, I'm not painting the spiritual leaders that I've had in my life that this was a constant thing for them. But I think every human being that is in spiritual leadership in some form or fashion will sometimes slip into the human part of themselves. You know what I'm saying? They'll like take that role as who they are. And so I've seen all of them do that from time to time too. And it'll always just give me like a little, it was just a little ew on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I will say majority of where I see and feel that ick usually came from people outside of my direct spiritual
Yes, I
authority.
agree. I agree 100%.
And I think it's again kind of how we were brought up. There are so many people that want to be in spiritual authority, and it's like being this pastoral figure is the ultimate.
Mm.
And it's because there's this layer of I don't know if it's this layer of power or it's this idea that um I think people like to be in charge.
Mm.
And I feel like I've seen a lot of times where people were put in charge that God never intended to be in charge. And that's okay. Not all of us are meant to be the head
What's okay?
person.
That they're in charge and they really shouldn't have been, or
No, no,
that
no, no.
that's not okay.
No, I think it's okay that we're not all number one. And
Yes,
number
yes.
one isn't the right word, but I do think there's this maybe there's this lack of importance makes us feel less than to God.
Mm.
And I just don't feel that that's the case. I know it's not the case, but it's like we get this idea. And again, I think a lot of it is a system thing. Anytime humans get the system put in place, systems are good, but we do a really bad job determining what's right and wrong.
Mm,
And I think that's why this stuff has to be in check. There have to be questions asked. Now, I also think some of those icks are caused by the congregation because of our inability to, or our, the way that the pedestal that we put those people on. I think sometimes pastors and spirit people in spiritual authority slip into those positions because of the expectation that the congregation puts on them.
hmm. They elevate them too far, you mean?
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
then you just find yourself trying to satisfy and fulfill these things and these responsibilities that the congregation gives you that God never intended you to have. And I think we see that a lot. And so there's not this boundary. Now, I do believe it's the job of the person that's in spiritual authority to set that boundary.
Hmm.
But I do think that to the modern day church, those boundaries don't feel like boundaries. I think those boundaries feel like disrespect. I think those
Hmm.
boundaries feel like, well, she's not a good pastor and they're not doing their job. Well, their job isn't to save us.
Right.
And I think the reason I feel so passionately about that is because um a lot of reasons. I think because what I try to put on myself, not because anybody really has put that on me, but sometimes I try to put this idea that we go back to that, I need to be God for people. And that was never God's intention at
Hmm.
all for people in spiritual authority to be that or to do that. But I think as a congregation, we often put that on spiritual leaders.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what you're saying here and kind of zero in on the main issue I have, and that is the power dynamic. And what I see a lot, or when I've seen spiritual authority misused, it's like when the spiritual leader has a personal preference for how something goes. And that personal preference really doesn't make a difference to the kingdom. It's not like some pivotal piece of God's will. It's just I'm gonna use some trifling things like, well, we're gonna stay in this hotel, we're gonna go to this restaurant, we're gonna paint this wall this color, we're gonna pick this color carpet. And instead of just saying, this is my personal preference, that is then encoded and encased in this spiritual authority. I am the leader. And
Yeah.
that to me is just flat out a misrepresentation of what spiritual authority should be. And so, even those little bitty things, and again, I just chose some silly examples like at restaurant A versus restaurant B, that literally doesn't affect anybody at all. But
No.
it's just like if you're going to use the power dynamic that you have, and you have been given some kind of power in the spiritual authority, if you're going to use it for that, then can I trust you to really use it in the places where it needs to be used? Because you're walking around painting the walls that color and saying God told you to, when I just don't
Yeah.
think that's the case.
Yeah. Well, and I completely agree. I do think I get the ick too, because I am very much aggressive's not the word, but I am very much like if there's an issue, if there's an issue, um, I want to, I want to deal with it. I want to
Hmm.
talk about it.
Hmm.
And I don't do well with anyone in leadership who is not willing to have the hard conversations. And I feel like a lot of people want the title, but they don't want the burden that comes with the title, the heaviness that comes with it, the questions, the holding people accountable. And I mean just basic, like you are you are meant to do this in the church. Why aren't you here to do that? Like I'm not even
Hmm.
talking spiritual stuff. I'm
Hmm.
talking about
Hmm.
we're doing something here. Um and I feel like people aren't willing to have those conversations. One other thing I'll say is
Yeah.
I think people excuse or they if you're in spiritual authority, we feel like because we are in spiritual authority, we have all of the knowledge. Where there are some things that pastors are not meant to counsel. A lot of pastors should not do marriage counseling. Like they just shouldn't. You're not qualified. You
Yeah.
don't know. And I'm not saying don't go to your pastor.
Sure, sure, sure.
But there has to be a point where that person in spiritual authority recognizes I'm not
I have
qualified
a
to go
limit
any
here.
further.
Yeah.
And I that is something that I think that pastors they want to be the one that knows best and they just don't all the time.
Hmm. I think again, you're leading directly to something I want to add to this conversation, which is the way that human beings think about and grapple with spiritual authority itself. So what bothers me, and when I've seen this in fits and starts and places in my life, and as you suggested, much more often in my life, I have witnessed it from things I have not been directly involved in. And this gets to the crux of the matter to me is that when spiritual authority is misused by human leaders, they start to view spiritual authority as like a, and maybe this is just dumb because this is the video game I'm playing right now. It's about medieval knights and I'm fighting with armor. They take spiritual authority and it becomes this armor that allows stuff to just deflect off of them and they can do what they want rather
Mhm.
than I think the way to grapple with and think about spiritual authority is it is a weight that you have to carry all the time.
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
not a benefit to you. It is not to make you better in some way. In a lot of ways, it is a heaviness to you and a way to drag on your life and a way to quote unquote make things work. You know what I'm saying? Not make
Yeah.
things work because you're closer to God, but don't look at it as you are stepping into Iron Man's suit and you can just blast off and do whatever you want to do. Think about it like somebody added an extra cross on top of your personal cross, and now you got to carry this extra thing. And so when you're thinking about it like that weight like that, I feel like you respect that. You realize what it is. You realize your own inadequacies for carrying that around. And I think that's super important for a spiritual leader to be able to say, I've made a mistake. This is probably not
Yeah.
the right thing, right? Those types of things I think are critically important. And to me, that's the philosophical underpinning in that is how are you approaching that? Are you wearing it for your benefit? Or are you carrying it as a burden?
When you say that, I, I'm on the same exact page. And there is a quote unquote high that people get and that I
Hmm.
get when I speak in front of a crowd
With any power at
with
all,
any
any
power.
kind of, right.
And I love it. I love to speak in front of people. It doesn't,
Hmm.
I mean, you get normal nervous, but like even at work, I feel like it's something I enjoy. But I think with spiritual authority and pastoring and things like that, we think that's it. And we all have the language to say this is the smallest part of ministry, but yet it becomes the biggest part of ministry,
Mm.
getting in the platform
Or the only part.
or the only part. And I think what you're saying is so important. There's so much weight that comes from the other pieces of it. And when you're not doing the other pieces, you're really not doing what spiritual authority was called to do, and that is to serve the people. It is true, even though it's a cliche, your the biggest part of ministry is not being in a pulpit. I will say this though.
Hmm.
I have I get that shield up when
Do you?
I yeah, when I hear people outside of religion,
Okay.
people
I'm
that are
glad you're
not
bringing this up.
religious,
Hmm.
yeah, talk about pastors and what they should and shouldn't do
Hmm.
without understanding the role. And so I feel like what that does again is it gives pastors godlike power when they're never expected to be God.
Mm.
And so there's never a safe space for them to mess up or to say, this is the direction that I'm leading this church. But if it fails, it's on me. But it's not because I'm not a good pastor or not
Yeah,
a good
sure.
Christian.
Sure.
And so I get very defensive when I see these people saying, "Aren't you a Christian and you should have let all these people blah blah blah." It's like you have no
Hmm.
idea
Hmm.
what they're dealing with. And I'm not even talking personally. I'm talking the things they have to juggle within a church. It is difficult. That is middle management, and there is nothing worse than middle management. So there isn't. You're not paid enough.
No,
You're not,
yeah.
you're taken advantage of. There's a pull from the top and a
Yeah.
pull from the bottom.
Yeah.
And so I get really bothered when people call out pastors. Well, okay, there are things that should be called out. So let's
Yes.
not take away from that.
Sure.
But I get bothered when they call it, well, aren't you a pastor? Well, they're not God. They're humans.
Yes. It's a strange job, though, to your point. It's like, I think about this often, and maybe you do too, and maybe I can make a couple of analogies here. I'm in year 15 of teaching. You are in year
9.
9. I am so much better as a teacher in year 15 than I was in year 1.
Gosh,
And
it's
I,
unbelievable.
I often think back to my students in year 1, and I was like, wow, I was doing them such a disservice. I mean, I was
Mhm.
doing the best job that I could. I'm not saying it was horrible, but I was doing the best job that I could at the time. But I have grown, or like even more than that. What about a doctor, like a surgeon? You have like 20 years of surgery experience. You are so much better than you were on day 1. Like you don't want the
For
young
sure.
kid doing your surgery. So everybody grows in their capacity in their job. For spiritual leaders, a lot of them, this is their job.
Yeah.
You are going to get better at it, and you can't do the thing where you somehow think that God has called you to do this. And so it's just perfection from day one all the way through. You got to be comfortable enough in your own skin. And really, I think comfortable enough in your own relationship to God to have the humility to say, God, sometimes I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make the wrong calls. It's not because of you, God. It's because of my humanity. But that's to your point about the outside. That's something that's to be expected, right?
Yeah.
This is a person doing a job. They're going to get better. They're going to have bad days. They're going to make mistakes. And if we lose track of that because we somehow morph this into, oh my gosh, watch this example, like a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. Like we just
Ooh,
morph this into some kind of Avenger level Ninja Turtle, like awesome, never makes a mistake. That is wrong and bad expectations. And I think that happens a lot because the pressure to be perfect is really high on this job.
it's very high. And unfortunately, I do go back to this idea that yeah, there is a higher standard.
There is.
And
You're right.
there is, but do we hold that standard so high that people then feel like they have to live so secretly, and so then we start living so secretly?
Mm.
But maybe it's backwards. Maybe we get in these positions and we live secretly because we can hide behind the power. I don't know which comes first.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should try to round this discussion into like, okay, we always do this in Christianity. When you and I, and we do this often on this podcast, we throw our hands up in the air and we'll say, like, well, what did Jesus do? Like we even just wear the wristband, WWJD. And I think specifically, this is going to be weird that I say this, but I think specifically in this example, Jesus is both a perfect example and an imperfect example of
Mhm.
spiritual authority. And let me hold off on the imperfect for a second. Let's go to the perfect because I think we would be remiss in this episode if we're going to talk all about spiritual authority if we did not contrast the type of leadership and authority that Jesus showed while he was on the earth with some of the things that you and I are calling out. So, Hannah, just again, blank slate, Jesus is your canvas. What is it that you see from the scripture, from Jesus's life, that you can pull out and be like, that's what I want in my leader. That's what I want in my leader.
I think Jesus was intimate with people and built relationships.
Mm.
And I think he created safe spaces for people to follow him without shaming the person. And I think that is huge to me. There was a lot of humility. You understood who was in control. It was always clear who was. I mean, people were following him. They were drawn to him, but he was always the lowest. It felt like he was always the one washing the feet. He was always the one calling out this or spending time with the sinner. He always recognized the marginalized person. And
Yeah,
I
he
think
was
that's a great
not.
form of
I
leadership.
I mean, of any human being that's ever lived to be able to leverage their divine authority, it was Jesus.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
just never did that. He never did that. Even when he is, you almost said this, I think earlier, even when he was like confronting sin, even the way he would confront sin was more from the perspective of, let me tell you this because it's going to save you and make your life better. It was not, let me tell you this because literally, but literally, this is what it was, Hannah. I am God and you are the person, so you should do what I say. That was
Yeah.
never the approach that Jesus took. And yet, I've seen examples of it when spiritual authority is misused. It becomes this like, well, how dare you disobey me, the
Yeah.
spiritual authority figure? Well, if Jesus didn't act like that, how in the world do you think, as a human being, like a
Yeah.
regular Joe human being, you can act like that?
Well, everything nowadays is not about restoration. So when people call out sin and they say it's an abomination, that's a whole other conversation we can have at a different time. But
I would
when
love
they
to.
call, yeah, when they call it sin and they call it an abomination, it's never for the things that God intended it to do. Well, why are we calling it out as that? Is it for restoration? Is it to show mercy?
Mm.
What's the reasoning for doing what we're doing? And every time Jesus called something out, it was for restoration. And humans have a tendency to call out things, to call them out and to say this is wrong and you're wrong. We do it in shame and we claim we're doing it in love. Love the sinner, hate the sin. It all goes back to that. Jesus, again, he did it. He did it so people could find restoration. That it was all in love every time. It wasn't you're bad. I can't believe it. You are an abomination. It was not that. It just
Wasn't
wasn't.
that? And then as far as him personally, he was shunning praise.
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose there are some certain examples that go against that. Like I'm thinking right before Easter with Palm
sure.
Sunday. Like there are some certain things like that. But in general, he's shunning praise. He's shunting attention away from himself. He's not enriching himself. He's not taking of the first fruits. None of that kind of stuff. And so, obviously, I'm saying this metaphorically, although I may or may not have witnessed like literally this situation. If you're using your role of spiritual authority to go get like the first piece of the middle of the cake dessert because you need to be first because you have the spiritual authority. That right there, again, it's not like you need to be fired from being the pastor,
No,
but
no. Yeah, sometimes it's just human, but yes,
but
still.
that's like a misuse of spiritual authority. But that
Yeah,
metaphor of grabbing the dessert first can go into some really serious things where spiritual authority figures can misuse this to enrich themselves, empower themselves. When it becomes about you instead of becoming about the kingdom, again, you've just whiffed on that. And that is something that we saw every single vignette in the life of Jesus. He is only worried about the kingdom up
yeah,
until his death on the cross, right? He's only
yeah.
worried about the kingdom, including his life versus doing it for himself.
Well, and this is where I had some pushback with this idea of modeling our leadership after
Well,
Jesus.
good. This was
And
the
maybe this
imperfect
is
part.
where, which
Yeah.
is funny because I didn't know you were going to go there. I don't think that we should model our leadership after Jesus because Jesus was about follow me. And honestly, when Jesus was leading on this earth, he was gathering the disciples
Hmm.
and he was teaching to the multitudes.
Hmm.
But people in spiritual authority now, we're not just gathering, which we could, but we're not just gathering this small group then to be dispersed. We are that group that's being dispersed.
Correct.
And so when I start putting myself in check and thinking about how I'm leading, I think about how Paul is writing to these different people and instructing them to lead. But what I found so interesting is and again, this doesn't change how I feel about how the modern church is, but they didn't have one man pastor. Like they did not have a pastor, they had elders, and it was a group. And a lot of that had to do with they moved from that whole follow me to let's follow the spirit together.
Hmm.
And I do think there has to be leadership. There has to be somebody that the buck stops with. Um, but I think we've really got to think about how that leadership is framed because I think when one person gets too much power, I think it's detrimental to them because again, you start taking on things that God didn't intend us that
Mm.
Jesus, he did not intend us to take on. We
Hmm.
weren't meant to say follow me. And then what happens is when a pastor dies or leaves, the church dies because
Mm.
it wasn't we were following a goal,
Hmm.
but we were following a personality. We were following a vision cast by one person as opposed to a vision that was adopted by a church who has a say in everything that we do.
That's really great. I mean, that's so important, and you're so right. And I think so much of the time that happens, it almost happens subconsciously. But your
Yeah.
example of when a pastor dies or something happens to that pastor and the church just having this huge blow, I mean, there's probably going to be some negativity when you have to change spiritually, right? That's just kind of how humans work. But it shouldn't die. It shouldn't
No.
disappear because it's not about the person, it's about the big vision idea. So the imperfection that I see in terms of using Jesus as the model here is I absolutely 100 billion% think that spiritual leaders should seek to emulate the character traits of Jesus, the
Sure.
humility, I mean, Jesus just flat out said it himself. You have to be a servant to be a leader.
Yeah.
Where it's imperfect, though, is, and you've kind of already said this, we both have, but just to say it, succinctly like this, there is no pastor on the planet that is Jesus,
No.
that has the status of Jesus, that's got the power of Jesus. And
The
so,
clarity, the knowledge, the connection.
like, you are literally not, I mean, this is the dumbest thing I'm going to say all day, but you are literally not Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so you cannot put yourself in that position, in those shoes. You're not Jesus. You're never going to be Jesus. You weren't designed to be Jesus. That's not what your role as spiritual leader is. And when that is confused, even if it's not consciously, it's not like the pastor stands up and says, well, guys, I'm Jesus today, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they start to act like that and they start to use their power like that. That is the imperfect nature of this to me. And we can't use one to one Jesus as our example for this because it is different.
It's different. 100%. And I think again, it when when you try to emulate that too much, it does become a one man show,
Hmm.
and it becomes someone who is making decisions out, outside of God and more inside of their own thoughts and their own ideas. And that's just not what it's intended to be.
No,
It's
not at
all
all.
intended to be servitude. And I think we lack a lot of that. I just, again, I find it interesting that the elders part, and I know there are churches that have elders. And I was, trying to compare it because it's just what I do, like to how our church runs. And then I started thinking, okay, we have assistant pastors, people that are involved in making these decisions. So although we've moved away as a big C church from this like true just elders leading everyone, and then Paul and these other people writing letters in, these people that we're planting, um, I still think that we do it in a way that is biblical, because maybe that pastor is still considered like what Paul would have been, these
Mm.
people writing letters and instructing, and the elders being assistants in the church, as long as people are given um, the freedom to have a voice in
Yeah.
what happens.
Well, we've whined and bellyached here for about 37 minutes or so. Should we end positive?
I think so.
Do you think we
Yeah.
should end for our
Yeah.
listeners on like what does it look like when it's right? Because again, I want to reiterate this. There is so much out there that is right.
Yeah.
And even the people, even the examples that you and I are thinking of, or we have been thinking of, even those people who are misusing it at moments, I've never run into a spiritual leader or ever seen one that is constantly misusing it, right? Even those people who are guilty of kind of falling into some of these traps that we have identified today, even they have good moments and
Sure.
moments where their leadership is good. So Hannah, what is it to you, or what is a characteristic, or what is a way that we can know this is positive? This is a good spiritual leadership experience.
This is just what I'm going to do here. I do want to say that there is a lot that my pastor and my dad, I feel like, does that emulates that. And he is not a perfect man, and he would be the first to admit that.
Sure.
Um, but I think a lot of that comes from being willing to be available and do the things that other people won't do.
Mm.
Um, and standing up for things that he believes in, and calling things out that are necessary, but doing it all in love, and being willing to stand for marginalized people.
Hmm.
Greed, I think things like greeting people and making them feel welcome, all of that stuff, I feel like demonstrates healthy spiritual authority. Somebody that's willing to call on the people around them to get answers on how we should do things or what is our vision. I think those are things that demonstrate a healthy spiritual leader.
I think so too. I think it's vitally important for spiritual leaders to invite feedback. And I
Yeah.
mean real feedback. I don't
Yes.
mean yes man feedback. And I think what that is underneath is that is recognizing your human limits.
Yep.
And you've already spoken about this eloquently, but not every pastor should be leading the building committee to build a building because they have
Nope.
no idea about it.
No.
That's not a failure on the pastor. That's just the reality of the situation. And so when
Yes.
you invite feedback and you name your own limits,
Yep.
here's what I am good at, here's what I'm not good at. When you recognize those things, it doesn't all weaken you. To me, it strengthens you because then you
Yes.
can raise somebody up next to you and draw on other people's expertise. You're not the fountain of all things. It's okay to have help. It's okay to have
Absolutely.
other streams in the fountain. It's totally fine.
Yep.
What
Yep.
else? Do you have anything else?
Let me think.
I
I don't
do.
have anything written down. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Okay,
Let
okay.
me get my mind going.
I think that it's important to. You already said protect the vulnerable, so
Yep.
we'll take that one off. I also think this kind of dovetails with what I just said, but like, if you're okay being questioned, and if somebody asks you a question that, like, I don't know, shakes the foundation of your idea or something like that, for a spiritual leader to be able to take that as welcome that and not take that as an
Oh
attack,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that's very important. And here's the way that I'll analogize it. God gets screamed at all the time.
Yeah.
David did it and Moses did it. And so many Bible characters questioned God, were angry at God, said, God, why are you doing this? And God never responded to that in the way that a human being, you know what I mean? Like David could have just
Yeah.
been backhanded 25 times in the Psalms. And God's like, I'm done with it, dude. Do you not realize what I've done for you up until this point?
Yeah.
But God is secure enough in his own, this is a stupid word, but he's secure enough in his own godness that he's okay being questioned. I think that
Yeah.
now, I think there's a line when questioning becomes bad, but provided that you're within those boundaries of what's appropriate, I think for a pastor to welcome being questioned, where he or she will go and reflect on that and potentially change what they are doing. Again, that to me is strength, not weakness. That's you
Yeah.
being secure in who you are and not weak in who you are.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still push back a little bit with this idea that how God receives it is the way a pastor should, only because I think we have to understand that pastors and spiritual leaders are human.
They
And
are.
so the way that Moses or David would talk to God is not the way that a human should talk to another human. So that last statement, I like that you said there has to be this balance of being respectful and understanding people are people too, from the person presenting the question,
Yeah.
but the person receiving, that person in spiritual authority, it to me, you are abusing spiritual authority if you are not willing to be questioned. I
Mhm.
mean, who are you? I mean, you're not God. You know what I mean? Like there has to be an open opportunity for that questioning. So I think you've got to have both of those. And I think I just always get nervous leaning in too hard to one side
Yes.
because I hear that. I think I always think back to this stuff on the internet that bothers me so
Yeah.
badly when people call out pastors like they're not human beings. But when we do away with that, then people they do abuse the power. So it's like there's
Exactly.
this balance you
Yes.
have to have, as is everything.
I know, but this conversation, you're so right. This conversation is so delicate and you can go is so quick to go too far in one direction or the other that this maybe above most of the conversations that we've had, you really have to exercise spiritual maturity.
Yes.
You really have to your point earlier, you have to have relationship, you have to love one another, you have to know where people are coming from. If you and I are sitting, and we are a lot sitting in leadership meetings around the table, and you say something, I hope that you would know me well enough to know that if I question it, I'm not questioning you.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? I'm just
Yeah.
comfortable enough with you that I'm asking the question. I think when you, as a leader, when you foster that kind of environment, not only are you stronger as a leader, but your organization will be stronger. Your structure will be strong. Everything will be stronger
Yeah.
when everybody's pulling in the right direction and chasing that vision, like you said earlier.
I have to say,
Yeah.
I hate to add this at the end, but I think that's why it's so important that spiritual leaders are doing personal work, because I think lots of times, again, it's that higher standard. If you're not, the scripture or something that's about like if your house is not in
Yeah.
order,
Yep.
like your house has to be in order.
Mm.
And that is one of those things, like that is just the expectation if you're in spiritual authority.
It
You
is.
have to have yourself not all figured out, and not that doesn't mean you don't have mistakes, but you do have to be working on yourself because you have to be available to take feedback. You have to realize that questioning and feedback does not always mean it's an attack on you. It is just a questioning, like, could we do this differently? So I think that's a great point that you said.
Well, here's the last thing I'll say. And then, Hannah, I'm just going to be a kind friend and I'm going to give you the last word on this. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I just
okay.
want our listeners to know that if you have moments where you question spiritual authority, questioning is not rebellion.
Yeah.
It is okay to be cautious. It is okay. I mean, Paul writes, I don't know, 150,000 times in the New Testament that we are to watch carefully and test the spirit and make sure they're not false teachers. This is an ethic that is built into the foundation of Christianity. That's just what it is, right? And Paul wrote that to almost every New Testament church that he wrote to. So within, as Hannah suggested, within the right bounds and within the right limits, not only are those things not wrong, those things are healthy.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in a situation or a position where your spiritual leadership is constantly shutting that down and using their status to quiet and silence questions that is okay for you to have, then again, I hate to throw this in at the end. I think you may need to find a different spiritual leader. I think you may
Yep.
be sitting under someone who is abusing that power, not necessarily because they're a bad person, just because they are a person. And you may need to look outside of that.
And I think too, it's okay if you can't serve under a person. That kind of thing is okay. And if you need to
Hmm.
find someplace else where you can serve, you got to do what you got to do. And I don't think that means you should if you're hopping from place to place, then maybe you need to look inward. But if something's just not meshing, it doesn't mean that the pastor's wrong. It doesn't mean that you're wrong.
Correct.
It could just mean that you need to find someplace different.
Hmm.
And that's okay to do too.
It is. All right, Pastor, we know you're listening, so we just want to know, we want you to know we love you, we appreciate you, and we're so grateful to have a leader who exercises spiritual authority in the right way. We really appreciate that. We also want to thank everybody for joining us today. We always enjoy going beyond Sundays and hope that you enjoyed the conversation today. If you have any thoughts or comments, or honestly, any stories of spiritual abuse and misuse that you want to talk about, we would be happy to correspond back and forth with you. You can reach out to us. All of our links for everything is on beyondsundayspod.com. So until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.